There has been an evolution in this thinking, even in the US, calling for more scrutiny and regulation of social apps, really given the outsized role that they play in media, in politics, and world events, and the real world harm that they can and sometimes have caused.
Hey gang, it's Monday, September 16th. Jasmine, Matteo, and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily. It's an e-marketer podcast. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by two people. We start with our vice president and principal analyst covering everything social media based on the West Coast. It's Jasmine Emberg.
Hey Marcus, hey everyone.
Hello there. And we also have on the other coast, on the right-hand side of the country, our principal analyst covering Latin America and Spain. It's Matteo Cervels.
Hey Marcus, great to be here.
Hello, sir. So we start with today's fact. Why is the medical symbol that you often see on the side of ambulances a snake or two wrapped around a staff? Do you guys know the thing I'm talking about?
I think so. I'm trying to picture it in my head right now.
Matteo, do you?
Yeah. I think so.
You've seen it a bunch, but no one really pays attention to it, myself included. So anyway, the Greeks regarded snakes as sacred and used them in healing rituals to honor Asclepius, the god of medicine and healing, as snake venom was thought to be remedial. That's insane. And their skin shedding this makes more sense. Their skin shedding was viewed as a symbol of rebirth and renewal, emphasizing the transition from sickness to being cured. So that's why. There are two versions of the medical symbol. The single snake cord around a staff version of the emblem comes from Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine and healing, whose staff had a single snake cord around it known as the rod of Asclepius. And there's also a winged version of the staff known as Caduceus, carried by Olympian god Hermes. He was the messenger between the gods and humans, hence the wings, and also a guide to the underworld, hence the staff. It said Hermes used the stick to separate two fighting snakes, which then coiled around his staff and remained there in balanced harmony. If you see an ambulance, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've never seen an ambulance, you have no idea what I'm saying.
This
But you'll see
explanation also makes me very happy that we live in an age of modern medicine.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Snake venom. That's what they thought. Let's just pop a bit of that on it. Be fine. Anyway, today's real topic. What to make of democratic countries banning social apps. So in today's episode, first and lead, we'll cover the implication of X getting banned in Brazil. And then for another news, we'll discuss a coming Snapchat redesign and social media warning labels inching closer to reality, maybe. But we start with the lead. So, a few weeks ago, Alexandre de Moraes, top justice on the Brazilian Supreme Court, banned X in the country until the company agrees to comply with the court's orders, writes Dacia Tolentino of NBC News. She explains that X refused to comply with the court's orders to suspend dozens of accounts for allegedly spreading disinformation and declined to name a local legal representative as required in order to receive notifications of court decisions. A panel of justices on the Supreme Court upheld de Moraes' decision. However, Reuters reported that a Conservative Party in Brazil is seeking to reverse a judge's ban on Elon Musk's X or Twitter platform. Jasmine, you were the one who snagged this topic out of the headlines and said we should cover it, we should talk about it. So I'll go to you first. And this was a question you kind of wanted to address because it kind of gets at the heart of the story here. How significant is it that a democratic country like Brazil has banned a social app?
It's significant. It feels kind of like a historic moment. We know that X and other social apps are banned in other countries, but those countries aren't democracies like Brazil. There are some largely democratic countries, India, for example, that have also banned social apps. I mean, the TikTok ban there is a fantastic example of that.
Yep.
But I do still think this is a shocking turn of events. Although if you think about the characters involved, two of who you just mentioned, it may not be all that surprising. We know Elon Musk plays by and makes his own rules. And we also know that Moraes has taken a heavy hand with the law. So in some ways, it also feels a little bit like a flexing of muscles of these two people.
Matteo, I mean, Jasmine mentioned that we do see social platforms get banned in other countries, democratic ones. I mean, India, I think, and TikTok is a good example. I found one. So in 2016, British newspaper The Guardian noted Brazil had blocked WhatsApp 3 times in an 8-month period, a different type of social or messaging platform. How big of a deal do you think this is, this banning of X in Brazil?
It's definitely a big deal. It was a shocking turn of events, but maybe not so shocking if you think of how the discourse has been playing out on X. You do see a lot of misinformation, very right-wing propaganda. So it does beg the question, the balancing act of, is it freedom of speech, freedom of expression versus the freedom to aggress and the freedom to spew things that are not true and cause potential political upheaval and social unrest. Brazil also, similar to the U.S., they did have their own storming of like a mob stormed Congress back in 2023. I think in the U.S. we have it so ingrained, this freedom of speech. It's ingrained in our constitution. But other countries, it's taking a step of there's freedom of speech, but not freedom for harm or an aggression against broader society. And it is interesting when you think about it too, in terms of freedom of press. Brazil, it's not on the top of the list like the Nordic countries, but it's also not at the bottom of the barrel either when you think of the other countries that have banned X, such as North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, countries where you do have a dictatorship in power. So that juxtaposition, I think, is interesting when you look at the implications of it.
I mean, you bring up a couple of really good points there, but one that really stood out to me is when you talk about, the freedom of speech and the freedom of press, which, we take for granted here in the US. And I think that means that the gut reaction from a consumer standpoint for most Americans is that banning a social media app really just is antithetical to the foundation of freedom of speech that America really is founded upon. But I think it's also, if you zoom out and kind of look at the bigger picture of what's going on in terms of regulation around the world, there has been an evolution in this thinking, even in the US, especially among lawmakers and even a pretty substantial subset of consumers who are calling for more scrutiny and regulation of social apps, really given the outsized role that they play in media, in politics, and world events, and the real world harm that they can and sometimes have caused. I mean, just in January is coming up pretty soon, and we have the clock ticking on TikTok to divest or to be banned here.
Something else that jumped out to me was how much power there is in the hands of a few people. And Anna Ianova of the New York Times was detailing the personal accounts of what it means to lose access for so many Brazilians who had built their businesses on X. She explains that lots had to start from scratch after the taps were turned off for Twitter. They had to start from scratch to try and reach those clients, to market their work, to connect with sponsors. One gent, Adriano Catani, said X was where he got about 80% of his work as a freelance illustrator. So the idea that so many kind of businesses and livelihoods could be suspended so swiftly on the whims of a single tech executive, she writes, challenging a judge, shows how the digital economy has become concentrated in the hands of just a few tech giants. Jasmine, I think a lot of people still see these platforms as places where people kind of mess around and watch funny videos, and less so the kind of real world financial business implications that they have when you shut off the water between a business and a customer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think the, financial implications of all of this is kind of overlooked by many consumers in particular. I think the comparison with, other social media companies is also really interesting because, it's not just X that needs to comply by the laws in Brazil, right? It applies to other social companies. And you don't see other social platform owners or executives really reacting in the way that Elon Musk has. And that kind of brings me back to my earlier point about this being, partially really just the result of these very two powerful men who are just very much at odds in terms of what they expect for the platform in the country.
The problem here is it could take a lot of time for fans, clients, whoever to move over to other platforms. if they even bother to. So a lot of folks, they haven't built up audiences on other platforms, and so it's much harder to kind of migrate. Matteo, where are folks going to go? What other platforms are there to migrate to in Brazil?
We have seen an uptick in other X alternatives. One in particular has been Blue Sky, had about an influx of about 200,000 new users from Brazil that have signed up since the ban took place at the end of August. And, in the past too, when Twitter was then sold to Musk and rechanged to X, there was a lot of talk about, are Brazilians going to stay on the platform? And at the time, there was, a rise in Mastodon. There was a rise in Koo from India that had a big uptick. So the X alternatives are still out there, but Blue Sky right now has been the biggest beneficiary thus far.
A decentralized social media platform, Blue Sky. I saw a report of a couple of million people who had head to Blue Sky in the days following the ban. They were saying about 85% of those were Brazilian. And that doesn't sound like a few million. However, 41 million X users in Brazil. We cover those users, X users across the world, and we believe it's the third largest market, Brazil, for X. So 41 million total for them, which now can't use the platform. So adding a couple of million, is no small task. Jasmine, how much will the ban impact X in terms of users, and then also the knock-on effect there is ad dollars?
Well, it's a big loss for X from an audience standpoint. Brazil is X's third largest market worldwide, according to our estimates. It has about or just over 40 million monthly users. So with X being banned in the country, the platform loses a huge chunk of its audience. Brazil also plays an important role in things like meme culture and celebrity fandoms on X, which came as a surprise to a lot of X users around the world when, X was banned. And so this means that it's not just Brazilian users who are impacted by the ban.
Good point.
From a business standpoint, the impact on X's ad business really isn't going to be that severe. We already know that it's in a dismal state. It's also not a high priority platform for advertisers in Brazil. So it wasn't generating a ton of revenue there to begin with.
You mentioned Brazil is X's third largest market worldwide. That means it accounts for 11%, Brazil does, of its global users. That's nearly as many X users as there are in the whole of Western Europe. So it's a huge market. However, despite shutting off the taps to 11% of Twitter or X's users, there were some reports that X's Brazil revenue is just about 2% of its overall earnings. So maybe that's why Mr. Musk isn't terribly fussed about getting this sorted the way he would be, if he lost a market like the US, which is obviously going to account for a much more significant portion of the dollars.
Correct. I mean, if it were I think for our own estimates, if I remember correctly, if you look at the combined ad revenue share from the US and the UK, it's around 2/3 of its entire global ad revenue business. So I mean, if X were banned in the US or even the UK, I mean, that would be a significant chunk from a revenue standpoint. But since advertisers really, or if this were in, like an Instagram in Brazil or even TikTok in Brazil, I mean, then it would definitely have a lot more of an impact since those are 40 million isn't a small number, but when you think of the overall size of the Brazilian population and the size of platforms like Instagram or even Facebook itself, those have certainly much notably bigger user bases in the hundreds of millions.
However, it's only a couple of percent. However, this isn't a company that can afford to lose 1% of revenue, right? Yeah. At this point, let alone 2. Worldwide ad revenues have been cut in half since Elon Musk took over the firm, and there are no signs, according to our forecast, of a turnaround. We expect Twitter's ad revenues to fall by a further 7% over the next 2 years. By 2026, down another 7% from about 2 billion that they currently are worldwide, after being cut in half the last year or two.
Just to add some context to that, I like to say this data point.
Please.
The size of X's ad business today is roughly the same size that Twitter's ad business was in 2015. So I think that helps to paint the picture of just how massive an impact the advertiser exodus really has had on its ad revenues. How big of a step backwards
that is, yeah. Really quick, Jasmine, I mean, how much will this have knock-on effects for advertisers watching from afar? Because more advertisers could likely remain wary of X. Abby Miller of Digital Marketing News writing that a record number of advertisers, and I believe this was written before, or at least a survey was taken before this happened. So this isn't a direct result of Twitter X being banned in Brazil. But Abby Miller of Digital Marketing News writing that a record number of advertisers plan to significantly reduce their spending on X in 2025, citing a global survey from Kantar, which found that a net 26% of marketers intended to decrease their ad spending on X next year, marking the largest recorded pullback from any major global ad platform. What do you make of how advertisers in the US who are still there and still spending ad dollars might look at this? How significant do you think it is for them?
I think most advertisers at this point have made their choice of whether they're going to spend on X or not, barring some sort of miracle turnaround in what's happening on the platform. I do, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I do think, some advertisers might even breathe a sigh of relief if X were no longer an option, right? It's become a headache for many of them thinking about, do I spend? Do I not spend? What's going to happen next? And I think there is a fatigue, not only among consumers, but advertisers as well, about hearing about everything that's happening on the platform and with Elon Musk. It's been 2 years.
Interesting. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. One of the huge reasons for that headache is the brand safety concerns.
Right.
According to this same survey, only 4% of marketers believe X ads provide brand safety. That's compared to 39% who feel that ads are brand safe on Google. That's where we'll leave the lead for today. We're going to say goodbye to Matteo before we jump into the last portion of the show. Matteo, thank you so much for hanging out today and helping us understand the impact of X being banned in Brazil.
Always a pleasure, Marcus. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. We'll see you next time. All right, time for the fourth quarter of the show. Today in other news, Snap is testing a simplified version of Snapchat, and warning labels on social media get a second wind. Story 1. Snap is testing a simplified version of Snapchat, notes our briefing's writer Daniel Konstantinovich. Snap's CEO, Evan Spiegel, is trying to shake things up, pointing out that Snap's slower ad revenue growth was due to its ongoing shift away from relying on upper funnel spenders or large brands who tend to have inconsistent spending patterns in favor of the broader pool of small to mid-size advertisers. Jasmine, Snapchat testing a simplified version. Is a platform redesign just what the doctor ordered?
Well, Snap has been hinting at something like this for some time now. It's been talking about unifying the experience both on the back and the front end. And I do agree with the argument that it makes sense to have a more seamless or simplified app, both from a user perspective and from an advertiser perspective, given that they have a mostly uniform ad format now also across the app. But actually, the letter where this news came out in also had some other news. And for me, that was much bigger than this, which were the sponsored snaps or ads that are now going to show up in the main chat tab of Snapchat, which earlier didn't have ads at all. And It didn't because it's a tricky space to monetize via advertising without seeming like an intrusion of privacy. But as long as Snap's users don't get put off by those ads, and Snap is taking some steps to ensure that they're not super intrusive, that actually might be just what the doctor ordered to get Snap, its ad business in particular, growing at a rate that investors might be happy with going forward.
This did surprise me because I was thinking, why shake the snow globe now? Because granted, so Snap's share price is 1/10 of what it was 3 years ago. That's not great. But the first half of the year, revenue was around 20% from the same period last year versus 0% growth for the whole of last year. So it did seem like Snap was kind of turning the ship around. So it seemed like an odd time to try something different.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of work to do, right? They did grow their business last quarter, but they just didn't grow it at the rate that Meta did. And that, to me, was a huge part of the market reaction to its earnings because investors like advertisers are bucketing Snap and Meta together.
Good point. Story 2. Warning labels on social media get a second wind. A coalition of 42 state and territory attorneys general is calling on Congress to pass regulation requiring warning labels on social media platforms in support of US Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy's earlier suggestion back in June. Emma Roth of The Verge explains that the letter signed by the attorneys general cites research linking social media use to anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation in young people, along with studies that suggest social platforms disrupt children's sleep. However, some of the underlying research on the effects of social media have been disputed, notes Emma Roth of The Verge. But Jasmine, to you, what's the biggest takeaway from warning labels on social media seemingly getting a second wind?
I just have a question for you, Marcus, which is, since when
My favorite ice cream.
What?
It's fine. It's vanilla
Oh,
bean. Vanilla bean, because I'm edgy.
simple, basic,
Yeah.
in the
it's
best
classic.
possible way.
Good save. All right, go on. What's your real question?
My real question is, since when do teenagers or young people in general, since when are they put off by a warning label for anything?
All the time?
Are they?
The answer's never. Yeah.
I don't know what kind of
encouraged
teenager
by
you
them.
were, Marcus.
Yeah, you're spot on. But who are these going to have an impact on?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just to actually have more evidence of the harm that these social apps can cause. And I totally understand how concerning a lot of the mental health issues are that have either been caused or exacerbated by social media. And it is very clear that something needs to be done to solve the mental health crisis. I'm just, based on my question to you, not convinced that warning labels are the solution that we need for that. I think a lot of this runs much deeper than social media. The mental health crisis is something that you need to solve more at a societal level as well. And it feels like a Band-Aid over a larger problem.
It does feel like the tide's turning, though, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like it's not happening all at once, but it does seem slowly but surely like this is just adding more fuel to that fire. Miss Roth of The Verge pointing out that over the past year or so, lawmakers across the US have ramped up efforts to protect kids online. On a federal level, the Senate passed the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, and the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, COPA 2.0. On a local level, she was saying states like New York banned addictive feeds for teens. Florida will require parental consent for kids under 16 to sign up to a social platform starting next year. Dozens of states sued Meta last year over claims Facebook and Instagram rolled out features to exploit and manipulate young people. And others, including Utah, have filed a lawsuit against TikTok alleging the platform's addictive nature has harmed kids. However, lots of state level rules, she points out, have been challenged in court, some temporarily blocked. So it does not necessarily mean that there's terrific amount of movement, but it does seem like there's more noise than ever. Anyway, that's what we've got time for this episode. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Jasmine.
Thank you, Marcus.
And thank you to Matteo, who joined us in the first 3/4 of the show. Thanks to Victoria and Stuart, the podcast crew. Thanks to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast. How do I pronounce his name? Alexandre de Moraes?
Sure.
Okay.
Go with that with your lovely British accent.
Was it wrong? What did I do? I butchered the whole thing. It's like it's not even remotely close.
You're very close. It's all good.
Wait, you say it for me so I can hear it properly.
I would say Alexandre de Moraes.
Okay, I'm just going to say it the way I say it first. Yeah.
Exactly. It sounds nicer. It sounds much nicer.
My God, yours sounds amazing. Maybe we could just have your voice cut in as I say it. Maybe we'll do that.